Okay, so I think we're live. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm McKenna. I'm the owner here at Murder by the Book and doing another virtual event from home. Tonight, I am so excited to have the author of one of our huge hits of last year, City of Windows, joining us, Robert Pobi. He's here to talk about his latest release, Under Pressure, which I believe went on sale today. We're also joined by guest moderator. Many of you know her as a part-time employee at Murder by the Book, but also from Conversations from a Page and Thoughts from a Page. Cindy Burnett is here with us, and she is going to be doing the interview tonight to give me and John a little tiny break. It's okay, though. She's a huge fan of the books, and I'm sure she'll do a great job. Quick bios here. So we've got Robert Pobi joining us. He is the author of several novels, including the international bestsellers Bloodman and Harvest, as well as the Lucas Page thrillers, which began with City of Windows. He lives in Canada. Cindy currently works part-time at Murder by the Book and regularly speaks to book clubs and women's groups about her favorite reads and book suggestions. She is a voracious reader and book reviewer who administers a Bookstagram account at Thoughts from a Page, where she talks about all things book-related. She also shares her thoughts in her weekly Page Turners column in the Buzz magazine. So for those of you who are watching, if you have any questions, please pop them in the comments. I'm going to go away for a little bit. I'll be monitoring that. I will be collecting the questions and back in a little bit. But for now, I'm going to go away and leave it to Cindy and Robert Pobi. Enjoy.
Hello, Robert. How are you?
I'm great, Cindy. How are you doing?
Good. I'm thrilled to pieces to be here to talk with you about your latest book. I'm a huge fan of it, and I just can't wait to talk about it and hear more about it. So do we want to start out with you just talking about Under Pressure, telling us a little bit about it?
All I can say is it's a great book. It's about 400 pages long, and will knock your socks off. It's the second installment in my new series, which took a little prodding for me to agree to do. It seemed like a bit of a struggle at first for me to come up with the, I guess, gumption to sign up for that. My main character is an astrophysicist, and he used to work for the FBI. He's unusual for me as a character in that he doesn't carry a gun. He refuses to carry a gun. He's got 5 children. I'm not going to say he's definitely not a pacifist, but he's a man that tries to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. And he helps the FBI. He's got an unusual mathematical mind, obviously, and his mental horsepower is what comes into play all the time, which I think sets him apart. Besides his prosthetics.
Well, he's definitely a unique protagonist, and that was one of my questions for you. How did you come up with him? I mean, an astrophysicist, a professor at Columbia, former FBI agent. How did you come up with the idea for him?
I don't know if I came up with the idea or if I just met him on page 16. I honestly feel that that's just what happened. As soon as he climbed the stairs the first time, that's when I saw he had prosthetics, and the whole book just kind of clicked into place. That being said, we're all wounded individuals in life. I mean, if you have enough mileage or any mileage under the hood, we get dents and bumps and bruises and scratches in the paint and stuff. So Lucas, his physicality is actually, I think, less unique to me than his intellect. He's a very bright guy, sort of a two-eyed man in a one-eyed village, if you want to put it that way. So coming up with him, I guess he's just an amalgamation of characters. When I look at people like Carl Sagan or Stephen Hawking or anybody that worked on the Kepler telescope project or any of the Voyager missions, and I often wonder, are they the same species as a lot of the talking heads I see on television, or Instagram, what do you call influencers? I don't see. So I wanted to have somebody that I'd want to come back and visit more often, and so that's kind of where he came from.
Well, I just think it's fascinating how he can recreate the crime scene and how you write those portions of the book. And I just was sort of curious where you got that idea to sort of have him reflect back on it all and be able to sort of relive it himself, even though he wasn't there.
Well, that's a good question. I wasn't really sure how I was going to handle that, because in the first book, Lucas's specialty is numbers. I mean, just from any perspective, he's a savant, and he's a polymath. So Lucas looking at numbers is how I approach this. So with the first book, it was simple. It was geometry. We involved a sniper, so using geometry is easy. Then I'm thinking to myself afterwards, well, book 2, wait a second, they want another book out of this. What am I can't have him chasing snipers all the time. So the scenes, I tried to bring it down where Brett Kehoe shows up in book 2 on chapter 3, I guess, or chapter 4. And he talks to Lucas and he says, think of this as basic physics and chemistry, something you can handle. And that was kind of a way for me to shoehorn myself and the reader into seeing Lucas do other things with his mind than he did in book one. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but that kind of.
No, I think so. I just think that I love that because I feel like it makes it definitely a distinctive character, not something you see a lot in thrillers these days. And I think that's great. It's very nice to have a different take on a protagonist, an intelligent protagonist who's so funny in a more sarcastic way.
He's a lot of fun to write, Lucas. I enjoy spending time with him. Yeah. I catch myself laughing.
What about the bombing? I mean, so, he starts out with this very explosive scene with the Guggenheim. And how did you come up with that? And I think that's just fascinating that the people are all gone, but the building is still standing, which I have to say I was very relieved about because I love the Guggenheim.
It's an iconic building. I call it the Wes Anderson geometry of the Guggenheim building.
I saw that.
It's such a unique structure. The bomb, I don't even know how I came up with the bombing per se. I do these endless nights of research where I'll just, I'll spend like 3-4 weeks sometimes just, everything from the Library of Congress to, my own library to other libraries. FBI's opened up their files a few years ago. There's a lot, FBI's a wealth of information. And for my first book with the sniper, Ruby Ridge was the massacre at Ruby Ridge and what happened to the Weaver family, which was one of the biggest. And it's funny because I get a lot of hate mail about that book, and people don't realize I'm on the side of the Weavers. They seem to think that I'm criticizing. So I thought that was a little bit strange. Anyhow, so the first book was based on Ruby Ridge, and this book was very much based on Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. And I think that I just didn't want to have letter bombs like Kaczynski did. And I think just through my research, I came up with the aerosol explosion, which is, I didn't realize grain silos blow up all the time. So it's not a complicated explosion to finagle if you've got if you understand basic physics and chemistry, which was another thing that I knew would lead me into the story.
Right, to bring Lucas Page
in, exactly.
So that they're looking for him and it would be unique. The other thing that I was curious about was the social media aspect, which plays a large role. And when I was reading about you today, I see that you don't really do social media.
No, not really. I don't do social media at all.
That's what I was seeing. I had, in the past tried to tag you places and couldn't find you. So that explains that you don't do social media. But so that plays a large role in your book. That's kind of interesting.
Well, if you look at the American landscape right now, the cultural landscape, from politics to Instagram influencers to TikTok videos by comedians, it's impossible to avoid social media. Every newspaper you open up, whether it's the New York Times or the Huffington Post or even Breitbart, there's YouTube videos posted, there's Instagram, people are talking about Twitter all the time. I mean, your president just made Twitter very famous in the past couple of years, even more so than it was. So I kind of look at social media as a malaise afflicting a large part of popular culture. And what really got me interested in it was during the Arab Spring, and that they're organizing a revolution, via 140 characters, and I found that amazing. And it's a huge social force. I mean, social media, it's one of those things that's bigger than the sum of its parts, and nobody can understand it. Like, who's the bad guy in social media? Well, everybody and nobody, So that's why I thought social media. I just thought it was a nice way to reflect and look back on American culture and American society.
Well, I thought your story was particularly relevant with everything we've gone through this summer with the protests and organizing a lot of them via.
Yeah, it was a little pressing. I was weirded out by that.
It was perfect for that. But I did think it was interesting, and there's people who show up and are claiming it's fake news and all of that as soon as the bombing happens. A lot of it seemed like it's sort of playing out what we're living day to day.
There's a big problem right now around the world. It's not just an American phenomenon, although Americans highlight it with the Shining City on the Hill example. And in the past little while, we've seen that things are a little bit shaky on that hill. So yes.
Well, I liked that. I thought it was interesting, and it certainly made me think about what we're all living day to day.
Well, it's fun for me too, because it's not something I participate in. Like there's a couple of Twitter feeds I check just to see what's going on, but it's not an environment that I'm necessarily comfortable in. So I wonder, I had to talk to, a lot of younger people to help me get this right, talking to 18-year-olds going, can you please explain TikTok? I don't know what this is. And so they're looking at this.
That was going to be one of my questions about research and the research about the bomb, but also are using aerosol, but also about social media. If you don't really use it, how did you portray it so well?
This is the first time I've heard I portrayed it well, so thank you. It just, I ask a lot of questions, And I mean, I'm a reader too. It's not like I hit the newspapers every day for 2 or 3 hours. So, I understand, I guess current jargon or whatever, hip nomenclature happens to be circulating. So, you get a couple of buzzwords in and you can sound like you know what you're talking about, I suppose.
What about Lucas's family? The 5 adopted children, all that. How did that come about?
Well, I was working on Lucas and I liked him, but I didn't think anybody else was going to like him. I'm like, this guy's he's caustic. He doesn't suffer, he doesn't suffer people easily. Even people with great intentions, he just doesn't have the patience because his mind is working at warp speed. So this is a guy, he's sitting there staring at you like, please, can you get on with, I have things to go and think about. So I figured bringing children into it, and if I could reflect how he behaves with his family, because he's this caustic ogre out on the streets, but when he's with his family, he's this sweet, gentle, kind, concerned, generous man. And so I thought that the family would be a good way to balance Lucas's cantankerousness, and it also gives some levity to the story, because otherwise, the way I tend to work on a book, if we took that out, nobody'd get any sleep until the book was done, because I tend to write in a very fast, I keep the pace up, put it that way.
No, I feel like when I pick it up, I have to clear my schedule because I know I'm going to be zipping through the whole thing. And definitely, I do think it provides some levity for him. But I love him. I love his cantankerousness, and I think it's great that he doesn't suffer fools. I mean, I that's one of the things I really like about him.
Yeah, I get a lot of good. I tell you, this is the first book where the hate mail is overshadowed by the love mail. You know what I mean? It's I'm getting a lot more compliments than threats on my life, which is unusual.
So you switched genres when you started writing City of Windows, correct? You were not writing.
I was writing more psychological horror, I guess would be what my earlier stuff gets more comparisons to like Silence of the Lambs.
Okay.
Thomas Harris's type stuff. So I eased off, I guess, on the real deep psychological horror. But I still, this is the type of stuff I write. It's a couple of degrees this way or a couple of degrees that way of the center needle of thrillers, but it's, I'm still in the same ballpark, at least I feel it is.
What kind of made you go down this road versus continuing with what you were writing before?
Good question. I don't know. There's a story with Lucas. City of Windows came to me. I was looking at what's happening. The school shootings in the United States for summer of 2016. Everything from school shootings to it just, that was kind of the needle for me where the calendar just lit up, and I said, not that I feel that, a pop writer is supposed to tackle social issues, but I'm the kind of person, I've got a conscience about things, and so I like to at least study them. And so by studying it, by writing a book about it, it's a way for me to either both exercise my demons and to learn about something. So I guess so I get that's how I got brought to it, really. Yeah, I don't know.
Almost as a way to process it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a story.
So do you have a standard writing process? Are you one of those people who plots from the very beginning, plans it all out, or just sits down and writes? And do you write at the same time of day? How does all that work for you?
When I get to work on a book, I usually hammer out a rough draft in about 90 to 110 days for the first draft. And usually I'm working solid. I try to do 2,000 words a day, between 10 and 12 pages. My best day, I think I did 9,000 words one time, which was just, I don't know how that happened. And they were all good words. It wasn't, but sometimes I've written for 12 days where I just have to put everything in the shredder. So, I schedule. I only have 2 speeds, on and off. Like for me to be able to sit here for an interview is a really big thing for me. I'm one of those guys, I'll start work in the morning and, I think, I should go have a cup of coffee. It's for breakfast and it's already dark outside. So I'm lucky. I don't say I have ADHD, but I'm a little bit scattered. So when I focus, writing is one thing that enables me to focus. So I don't know. I don't really have a schedule. I just work like a dog. So and towards the end of the book, for the last 3 weeks, I work on about a 27-hour schedule, which means I stay up for about 27 hours. Then I go to sleep for 7 hours and I stay up for 27. So my schedule keeps rotating. I'm going to bed at 8 o'clock in the morning, then 2 o'clock in the afternoon, then 5. But I dedicate myself to the work. I just focus on getting the writing done.
Oh, that's amazing that you can be up for over 24 hours and still be writing.
Yeah, it's yeah, I've got the constitution of a horse. I'm just going to drop dead one day. I'll be walking down the street and it's going to keel over or explode or something. It's
It'll be like, it's because he never slept.
maybe, yeah.
So once you do your first draft, do you then kind of sit down and re-edit the entire draft, or do you send it off, or how does all that work?
I'll do the first 3 drafts. Nobody sees anything except me. So I'll write the first draft. And the way I work on a first draft is I never go back and rewrite anything. So if chapter 1 and chapter 2 and chapter 3, by the time I get to chapter 60, if things aren't lining up, it doesn't matter, I keep going. Otherwise, you end up with 300 copies of chapter 1 and no chapter 2. Right. I've changed, names of characters. I've changed sexes of characters in the middle of a novel. So if you went back and read something that like a first draft, you'd think that I'd had a nervous breakdown, or you'd wonder, no, there's no way anybody could read one of my first drafts. And then I'll open the book up and I'll put it beside me. I'll erase the file off my computer and I'll rewrite it as I go through. Like I'll go through and I'll make notes. I go through 3 red pens every manuscript. I do about 9 edits altogether. And I just keep hammering. So the first 3 edits, then I might send the first 100 pages to my editor or my agent. But I've got to feel the book's pretty strong. I don't like to let anything out of my hands that I'm not really proud of. Things are a little bit different on Under Pressure. I sent my editor saw the first 100 pages, I don't know, 4 months before I'd even come up with an ending for the book, which is unusual. I finished the book and I didn't have an ending for it. I wasn't sure that final thing with Lucas. I wasn't sure how to deal with it. I wanted it to be something good, so I said, you know what, I'll just leave it for now. And so that's the process in a nutshell.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I know everybody's different. And so it's always fascinating to me to hear how it works. Do you outline a lot? I mean, do you have it? Doesn't sound like you outline physically, but do you outline in your head ahead, or do you just sort of sit down and say, let's go, and it all kind of unfolds as you write?
Well, with Lucas, I'm lucky in that he's a very specific character. So I gather stories, for the 6 months I take off a year. I'm thinking, it'd be cool if Lucas did this, or it'd be neat if you said that. So when I come to a book, I've already got 15 or 20 interesting small scenes or bits of conversation or dialogue. I don't outline at all because if it's a waste of time for me, because if character chapter 1, the way I work, I've small chapters, and I average 102 to 104 chapters a book. So the way I work is each chapter has a point. Chapter 1, the crime. Chapter 2, introduce Lucas. Now, this is literally how, and it's really simple if I was to outline. Chapter 3, FBI gets involved. End of chapter 3, FBI realizes they need Lucas. Chapter 4, FBI visits Lucas. And that's the first 4 chapters. How I fill that out changes, when I get to the page, but I can't outline. If I outline, it's just wasting time because I never see where my work is going. I'm often surprised by what happens,
Well, I think that's interesting. I mean, that's always fascinating to me to hear how authors do it, because some are very methodical and lay it out completely, and others are the opposite, and all the books turn out great, so it just depends on your own method. And
you talk to a guy like Jeff Deaver. I mean, Jeff Deaver's outline turns into his novel. He just takes the outline and polishes and forms this wonderful book out of it. And I'd love to be able to think going forward like that, but I can only fix the beginning once I know the ending. That's my problem. And he fixes the ending, when he's at the beginning. So I think that's kind of cool.
Well, I think they're both cool. I mean, I think it's great that the story unfolds as you write too, because it can tend you a lot of different paths that you maybe wouldn't have thought ahead of time. So I think
absolutely,
the way your mind works,
Yeah.
So when I was looking you up, I saw that you were a renowned expert in English period furniture. So tell me about that.
I had an antique shop for 13 years dealing in 18th century English formal furniture.
Oh, cool.
I used to go to England 4 times a year on buying trips. So that's how I know about that. I mean, I've got an extensive library. I have 5,000 or 6,000 books on antiques in my library.
Wow.
And that's what I used to read almost exclusively. And I'd get to the store at 4 in the morning and I'd write from 4 till 10. And then I open the shop at 10 o'clock and, deal with the customers. So
you had the store, and then that's when you began writing around your owning the store.
Sort of. I was writing before that. I spent 20 years writing novels that I never showed anyone.
Oh, okay.
I just finished them, put them in a drawer, Then in 2005, 2008 and 9, I had a very tough year and a half. 5 people in my life died. And I remember standing in front of, the night after a lifelong friend was murdered, 2 blocks from me. And I was the last person to see him alive. And I stood in front of my store with the key in my hand. And I'd been writing this whole time, and I've been getting feedback from friends, but I wasn't sending anything out. And I just thought, if you put this key in this door and open up today, you're going to spend the rest of your life dealing with these people. You're never going to give writing a shot. And I didn't open that day. I went upstairs, made some 50% off signs, closed up the shop, and took a leap of faith.
Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that happened and made it a rough year, but I'm glad at least that the positive that came out of it.
It turned my life around. It's one of those examples where you can make something positive out of something horrible. It's whether or not it pays for it is another story.
Well, I think we're all learning that very lesson right now, trying to take the positive out of the negative. These online events, we would have never been able to interview, in person right now, but it's wonderful we're online together. So, and you don't do many interviews. So tell me about that.
It's a weird process for me in that I understand the writing part of my work. To sit down and do a book, I'm the guy you want to write a novel, no problem. I promise I'll deliver a great book. But this part of it, I enjoy it as well, because I like meeting people. I'm a people person. I always have. That's why I was in the antique business. I meet people. If I go to, the gas station or insurance seminar, I can have fun. I always entertain myself. But I don't understand how interviews translate into book sales. And I know that's kind of what I'm supposed to be doing, but it doesn't make sense to me. So I like the interviews, but I don't understand how it's part of the job of being a writer. Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense, because I do think that the writer part of it is pretty solitary. So to then turn around and have to be super social and be doing the other side of it can be difficult. But I think people really like to hear about the writing process and where people get their ideas. And I mean, I think you're doing a great job talking about Under Pressure, and people hearing it, I'm sure, are going to be dying to read it.
Oh, cool. I enjoy talking about the process, and I enjoy the whole thing. But like I said, I just don't know what my responsibility is here. You know what I mean? Other than to answer questions and stuff. And I like talking about the writing because, I mean, I became a writer because of the guys that made me want to do this. Every writer will tell you the same thing, that they've got their favorite book, and they've got the book that they've read and they realized, hey, I can probably do this as well as this guy. Right. So if I can influence, one person to go out there and fulfill that I'm not gonna say dream, but it is a dream. I mean, it's a lot, and it's a shit ton of work. So if I can influence somebody or give somebody an answer, help somebody become better at doing that, then, that's kind of, the privacy of my own office, it's kind of groovy, I got no.
No, I think that's true. McKenna was mentioning that I run these literary salons here in Houston, normally in person. Obviously they're online right now, but that was the thing that surprised me the very most about them, was how many people want to be writers. I mean, so many people come up to me and are like, oh, I'm writing a book, or I want to write a book. And so I think it's great to promote that and encourage people. And that was one of my questions for you, though, is what writers inspired you?
Oh, Peter Benchley. I mean, I read Jaws when I was 11 years old, and it just floored me. My favorite novel of all time, which I will put up against any piece of pop fiction, is a novel called The Eiger Sanction by a writer called Trevanian. He also wrote, most people know him for Shibumi. I was 19 years old, and I was dating this girl. And her father was a diplomat for the UN, and he spoke 13 languages, and he had this monster library. We used to go up and spend weekends at her cottage, and I'd grab a book every time we left, just because he had a really neat library. And I grabbed The Eiger Sanction. I was 19, and I went into I was in my sociology class in college at the time, and I started reading the book, and I just thought, wow. And I went out in the hallway, I sat down, I read it till it was done, and I just thought, this is the greatest novel I have ever read. And it taught me that pop fiction can be really smart, that it doesn't all have to be, guys punching each other in the face all the time. And so that was the book that really changed my life. And my thing is, as a child, I had a learning disability. I was terrible at reading. I guess it was probably a form of dyslexia, because I still have trouble with numbers. And I had to read. My mother had a conference with the school, and I had to read every night for 15 minutes with my mother. And this was like child abuse to me. I thought this was the worst punishment in the world. All my friends are having fun in the summer, and from 7 to 7:15, I have to read. And then on Saturday, she'd take me to the library, and I had to pick out a book. And then I'd have to read the first 3 chapters, and she'd quiz me on the first 3 chapters. And which is why I learned to pick out books with very short chapters. And that's why I write books with very short chapters. So everything's cyclical, what we learn,
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So, and I'm lucky because I mean, after I got into the reading, my parents, I mean, you know, when I was 10, I was reading, I started reading with Tolkien. My dad turned me on to Huckleberry Finn and Mark Twain's works, Karl May, Kipling. I mean, Rudyard Kipling is as far one of the greatest storytellers, you know, of all time. I'm not big into translated books. I mean, I've read a lot of the Russian authors, but like I speak French, and I read like my books translated into French, and the essence is gone. The storytelling, you can still be a great storyteller, but I'm not going to read Tolstoy in English and get the same. You know, I hang out with some Russian friends, and there's no way I'm going to feel that sadness and that internal melancholy and the desperate alcoholism, you know, that Tolstoy can convey. You know, so anyways, my influences are across the board.
What are you reading now?
Right now, nothing right now. I've been on a break for a couple of weeks. Let's see, what's the last thing I read? It's over there on my shelf. Slash's autobiography. I thought that was from Guns N' Roses. I read a lot of autobiographies.
No, that's very interesting and certainly relevant, you know, current. So, well, the short chapters I think are great. I mean, to me, with a thriller, short chapters are the best because it just keeps you going. You know, you're like, oh, just one more chapter.
Well, that's what I try to do too, and it's conscious when you read my books too. You'll see you're in one position, and I will take you out and put you into another position, leaving you hanging with this chapter. The next chapter leaves you hanging, so you have to go back. So I try to do that page turning thing. It's kind of, I mean, it's a dirty trick to pull on readers in a way, but I want people to stay up to the middle of the night reading my books because, you know, that's what made me want to write books. So.
Well, they will. That's exactly what I did. So, well, I'm going to wrap up with our last question. What are you working on anything now? I mean, I know your book just released today, so you may be very focused on Under Pressure, but is there a sequel or a third one coming?
Yeah, the third one's coming. It's the working title is Do No Harm. Somebody starts killing doctors in New York City. Okay. So we'll see how that goes, but it's going to be, I'm enjoying it. It's a I guess a smaller book for Lucas. I'm a little less characters, more like a play, I suppose. But so far, we'll see what happens. You know, by the time I get to chapter 35, he'll probably be off the rails again. You know. Is it slated for next summer? I don't know. I think we're not sure. It depends when I finish it. But they'd like to do it if I can get it in before Christmas. I think it'll come out next year, and if not, it'll come out the following spring. Okay. Well, fingers crossed. Thank you.
I'm back. Hi again. So we do have some questions from the comments. I also have a couple questions that I would like to ask, but I'll get to those in a second. Earlier, you mentioned that there's a book that every writer has an inspiration, and then a book that made you think you could do it. What was the book that made you think you could do it?
The Benedict Arnold Connection by Joseph DeMona.
Fair enough.
I don't know. It's not a bad book. It's a pop fiction book from the early 70s, mid 70s. And I think I was 22 when I read it at the time. I just said, I can do better than this. And whether or not I did is up to, you know, readers. I don't know, but.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're exactly on point that everyone has that idea. I was talking with two British authors, two women earlier today, and one of them said, she had read literature her whole life and was a creative writing student in class. And it wasn't until she read Nick Hornby's High Fidelity that the tone and the writing style of that book was so current, and she could relate to it so much that she realized, I can write a book, because if he could do it, then she could. She was trying to aspire to write those lofty literary things, and that was that for her.
Kind of with my childhood, learning to read with Kipling and Karl May, my big thing was I stayed away from pop fiction until I was in my mid-20s. And the book that changed my life, a guy by the name of Seth Morgan wrote a book called Homeboy in 1992, which is, again, one of the greatest American novels. And it just taught me that you don't have to write like Faulkner to be a great writer.
Well, your editor, Keith, emailed me earlier in the week and put in a plant question for you to set you up for a story that I'm curious about, because it ties into Texas. So,
Texas, I'm curious too now.
Yeah. So apparently you have visited Texas to visit the home of Robert E. Howard in Cross Plains, and there is a story to go with that. Can you elaborate, please?
There's a little story to go with that. Absolutely. I think I know what he's talking about. I was in Texas, I guess, 25 years ago. I was 25, 26 years old. And I saw on the map that Cross Plains wasn't far from, I think I was in Houston. I think it's a couple hours out of Houston. It might have been Dallas. And so I said, hey, Cross Plains is not far. And Robert Howard was an influential writer. I read him, I started reading in my early 20s, and I didn't realize that sword and sorcery, fiction, that type of fiction could be so well written. And I think it still stands up. People pick on it like they pick on Mickey Spillane, but I think that he really has a place in American literature. So I thought, I'm going to drive out there. So I rented a convertible Mustang. I bought a Buddy Holly tape in a gas station. And then I drove out to Cross Plains, and I'm driving around town, and I'm asking people, have you heard of this guy that lived in town, Robert Howard? And people, they're looking at me like I'm out of my mind. So I said, I saw the library. I went to the library, and I met this wonderful lady named Billie R. Loving. Miss Loving at the time was in her late 80s. So I don't think she's around anymore, but I want to take a picture of her, and she insisted on posing in front of the library with the American flag. And so she took me to Robert Howard's place. They had just bought it for, they were going to turn to a Robert Howard museum. She showed me one of his manuscripts. I got to flip through one of Robert Howard's edited manuscripts. And so at the end of the day, I said, Miss Loving, I'd love to take you for dinner. What's the most expensive restaurant in town? What's the best place? I figured it cost me $300. I just had one of the greatest days of my life. She goes, well, that would be the Columns, but the Columns is really expensive. She said, we go to Dairy Queen, it'll cost $5. I said, Miss Loving, I would love to take you to the Columns. So we went there, we both had steaks this big. She had 2 beers. She was like drunk off of her seat. And the bill shows up, and it was $11.92. And I said, $11.92. And she says, I told you it was expensive. So that's my Texas story with Robert Howard's place.
Oh my gosh. Well, that would not be the case in Houston, but maybe in Cross Plains. And it's funny, we have someone who's watching this who just commented that she is just west of Cross Plains. So it is a small world.
Texas is a big state.
I know. That's unbelievable. I don't know where Cross Plains is. It must be 2 hours outside of Dallas, because I've never heard of it. I could easily be wrong though. So Andrea asks, what authors do you like to read? Now, I know you've already mentioned a lot, but since she asked.
I like Lee Child's work. Lee's a great storyteller. I think he's a lot of fun. I read a lot of nonfiction. Mark Kurlansky, I recently read his book on the oyster for the 3rd time or the 4th time. I don't know how you can write an entire book on the history of the oyster and make it as interesting as a thriller, but absolutely he can. Let's see, who else? John Sanford, Michael Connelly. There's a lot of great writers. I don't even know where to start.
I mean, that's fantastic, because those are all the guys that are such bestsellers that we hand sell your books to. If they're fans, people come in and they say they're a fan of Lee Child or Michael Connelly, then we say, you haven't read Robert Pobi yet, and you need to be reading this. So I think you've done a good job with those being things you like to read and achieving a similar thing. So it's great. Why did you choose New York City as a setting?
My parents had an apartment in New York City for 23 years. I had 3 cars stolen in New York City. I, learned how to drink way too much alcohol in New York City. Woke up under a bridge a couple of times. I mean, I spent a lot of time in New York learning about it. So one of the old adage about write what you know, I'd love to write something about Los Angeles, but I don't know the city well enough. I haven't spent enough time there. But New York is the kind of place where I'm not gonna say it feels like home, but it's a second home for me as far as an environment where I always know where I can go get something to eat or go hang out with somebody.
Yeah. So I'm gonna do a little bit of housekeeping real quick. A lot of times people tune into these late and they wonder how they can see the beginning. So if you just come back after this is wrapped up, you'll be able to watch the video on Facebook from the beginning, or we'll get it uploaded to YouTube in the next couple days. So you can watch it whenever you'd like on our YouTube channel, Murder by the Book. Also, obviously we have copies. I had a picture of it up here, and I was looking at Facebook on my iPad there we go, Cindy can. I was using my iPad to monitor the comments and didn't put the picture back. But anyway, there it is. We have copies of that, plus the paperback of City of Windows. If you haven't read it, we highly recommend it. So we hope you'd consider getting a copy of that, especially since we've got the author here who's been talking so terrifically about it. I wanted to give Cindy just 1 second to talk about what she does with Conversations from a Page and her podcast, since she has taken the time to be a guest moderator tonight. So you want to give us a quick rundown on that, Cindy?
Sure. So in non-pandemic times, we have a literary salon that we operate out of a home, but anyone is welcome. And we invite authors that come into town probably 8 or 9 times a year. We've moved it online, similar to this, on Zoom for the foreseeable future. And we also run a book club. And all of that is at cfapage.net. And then I've just launched a podcast where I interview authors, and it's called Thoughts from a Page Podcast. And every Tuesday and Friday, I air new episodes. So I'd love for people to check it out. It's been a lot of fun.
So back to your writing style, I know you said that sometimes you work in like 24-hour stretches. Do you have any kind of routine or special music that you like to listen to while you write?
No, not really. When it comes to music, if I'm doing a really tense scene, I'll put on something that maybe fits the pace,
Okay.
you know, like the Ramones. But other than that, I don't have any superstitions. I don't have any routines. There's nothing I need out. There's no space. I could sit down at a bus stop and write. I can, you know, write outside. I'm one of those people that the best writing advice that I think anybody could ever get, Oliver Stone said, writing equals ass in chair. And it is the truest advice I think any writer could ever learn. If you sit there and stare at the page and work on the page, eventually you'll produce something. It may be terrible, but it'll be something, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So your editor, as previously mentioned, is watching this tonight. And he just said, Lucas has 5 kids, Laura, Alicia, Maud, Hector, and Stevie, plus a dog, Lemmy. Do you have 2 dogs? Do you have a clear image of each of them? Or are they still developing in your mind? And which one is your favorite?
That's a good question. I have a clear image of all the children. Absolutely. Some are playing larger parts as they're getting older. Like Maud is probably around 15 and a half, 16, and Lucas is starting to really develop a relationship with her. And she comes from a particularly difficult background. And I think that's bringing Lucas a lot of joy. Hector and Damien, the 2 boys, they're just growing into their own, especially in the next book, Do No Harm. I'm starting to, you know, understand and know them a little bit more. Alicia, she's just kind of, right now, she's almost like the comedic, the little court jester in the family. You know, she's finding her way in it. So I've got a definite picture, but I learn, it's like Lucas. Every time I spend time with Lucas, I learn something new about him.
So has he ever taken the wheel away from you and done something unexpected as
all
you get
the
to know
time.
him?
Yeah, absolutely. There's, you know, yes, you know, it's one of those things I really like. I'm trying to write a character who loves going to the gym, and he gets home and he's lighting up a cigarette, and I'm like, why are you doing this to me? You know, so, and Lucas is kind of like that. Like I wanted Lucas to be a drinker. He drinks milk and water. He'll have a beer on occasion. He does not like booze. I'm like, but how, what's going on? You know, so we don't really, writers don't have the control, or at least I don't have the control I'd like to. And that comes back to decision making. I mean, part of the process with writing a book is you have to make 10,000 decisions a day, not just which words to use, but the tone that you want to have, how big large the paragraphs are going to be, short sentences, long sentences, and the decisions you make with how you're going to make your character go or your story go. I don't feel you have as much control with that, because you'll make certain decisions that'll push you in one direction. And I think magnetism just carries you along.
Yeah. In what ways did you write Lucas to be like you as opposed to not like you?
Lucas and I are really actually very different, with the exception of one thing. Lucas is not a great team player. And I'm not a great, if my editor was here, he'd love to talk about this. It's not because I don't like working with other people. I don't know how, per se. Like, I know how to do my book part, and I hand it to Keith, and then Keith does his part. And I've learned since getting to Minotaur that a publisher can, I'm not going to say be a family, but there's a lot of people that really work well together there. And it's kind of forced me to up my game and to become a better person and a better writer to work under those conditions, because I'm so used to doing everything in my life myself.
It's a good crew you got there.
Yeah, they're the best. So that's how I think Lucas and I are similar, in that we're not really team players. I'm obviously sarcastic and caustic and critical sometimes, but we all are. It's impossible not to be. You know, we're children of the 20th and 21st century. So if you don't look around the world and ask questions, there's something seriously wrong with you. So I guess that's where our similarities end.
So I'm not looking at text. I'm looking at the Facebook comments, just so you don't think I'm being rude. So We
I'm
do
drinking.
have.
Is that okay? You know, well, you're
Fine.
reading it. There we go.
It's encouraged. So we have a comment from Carol that you will find interesting, given that you don't know how talking about your books necessarily helps. She just ordered all the books from us. So you have sold a new customer your books by talking tonight, which we
Carol,
appreciate, and good for you. So I actually love this question because I've been wondering this whole time. Teresa says, this is off topic, but what is the piece in Mr. Pobi's background? Is it a mask? It's very pretty.
This.
Yes.
Yeah. I've had a lot of interesting things come through my life. This comes from the Commodore Hotel in New York. It was built in, I think, 1931. And in 1979 was bought. And in 1980, it was covered in glass, and they pulled the building apart. There were, I think, 79 of these on the cornice of the building. They're, I'm not quite sure if they're Aztec deco sun gods or sunflowers come to life, but I think they salvaged about 15 of them. I've seen 2 others in the world, and I have one. So it just happens to be in my office overlooking where I write all the time. It
is pretty cool and eye-catching. I've been kind of staring at it this whole time too. So, and someone else said they were wondering as well. So fair enough. It's very cool. Jill asks, which Peripheral character in the series do you enjoy writing the most?
Peripheral. Well, I like Whitaker an awful lot because, I mean, I wouldn't call her peripheral. I think she's one of the bearing walls of the story of the series. I like Whitaker a lot because she challenges Lucas, and she challenges, we're all slaves to our own self-image, and Lucas, how he perceives himself, and Aaron too does that with him. So I'd say Whitaker, although I like Kehoe because there's this subtle menace behind Kehoe. As nice as he is, and as much as he's, friendly and polite, he doesn't care about anybody. He wants the job to get done, and it's not that he doesn't care about the casualties, but the cost of human beings is not something he considers. It's an ends over means thing, or a means over ends. Or ends over means. So I guess Kehoe would be the one I enjoy writing because there's got to be there's this undercurrent of electricity in the background where you just know he's kind of like, like the snakes in Rikki Tikki Tavi, he's just like this Nagin is just this he's being friendly, but it's like like the serpent in the garden, eat the apple, Lucas, come on in and work. So I guess Kehoe would be the character I like writing the most.
And what type of research have you done in the field in which Lucas operates with the astrophysicist, right? Is that, yeah. So why did you choose to make him that? I mean, to me, he seems like genius level, kind of like Jeffrey Deaver does Lincoln Rhymes. So that Lincoln Rhymes always so brilliant, he's going to figure it out. But this one's even more specific, right, with the angles and all that. So why did you choose that?
I was a big fan of Carl Sagan. I mean, scientific literacy has left our society, and I'm one of those people that I don't have a great science background in my education. I've got a good education, but I don't have as of after high school. I mean, physics and chemistry and me, we parted ways, and we did not reconnect. That being said, Sagan's book was Science is a Candle in the Dark: The Demon Haunted World, which is about the fight of science versus pseudoscience, like discussing UFOs versus how the sun operates. They're 2 completely different things. Or discussing ghosts and Bigfoot, or discussing why the moon rotates around the earth. So I just thought for a character that would, how do I research that? So I guess it's an influence, and when I need something for a story, I'll go look. But I'm not going to say that. But I've always, like, Scientific American's a magazine I've been reading for 25 years. So I'm always interested. I mean, I'm interested in anthropology. I thought about making him an anthropologist for a while because it's a discipline that I really find interesting. Evolutionary biology, mechanics is something that I've read 50 or 100 books on in the past couple of years. And so that keeps me going. So the research for Lucas just comes out of, wherever it comes out of, and I'm looking for something, or I don't know if I answered the question. This is the problem with my brain.
No, you did. No, you're good.
I start to answer the question and I'm, somewhere else.
Well, I mean, he's a unique character, obviously, as we've mentioned, but also one of the things that we always say about the series is how smart it is. Not just that he, as a very brilliant man, is smart, but the plotting behind it and the writing. I mean, it's obviously a compliment to you that we always say it's a smart series. But
I work hard on that too. I mean, that's something
Yeah.
I want to do. Like I said, I didn't want to be some guy that shows up and punches people in the face. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I wanted something that would make me think a little bit more. If I'm going to spend years with this guy, which I intend on, I have to like spending time with him. So it's got to be an environment where I learn something. And David Morrell, who wrote First Blood, The Name of the Rose, Brotherhood of the Rose, sorry, fabulous writer. And I was at Thriller Fest in summer of 2012, and he gave a seminar, and he said something that I knew beforehand, but I've taken as gospel since then. He says, don't write for a market. And when you sit down and you get an idea for a book, ask yourself, do I want to spend a year of my life with this idea? And it's probably some of the best advice I've ever heard, because it's absolutely true. You've got to spend a year of your life. I mean, poor Keith. Keith's had to read, like I said, he's read the first 100 pages of this book probably 15 times, just the first 100, so I think I have my work cut out to me, that I have to be smart, because I've got a very smart, experienced editor who's worked with some great writers in the past. He picked me up because he saw something in City of Windows that he liked and he wanted to continue. I think that we're both comfortable now that I can keep doing this. So again, I hope that answers the question.
No, it answers it fantastically. It's a fine balance that you manage between making the book kind of for lack of a better phrase, like an airplane thriller. Like, you want to keep turning the pages because of those short chapters and because it's so cinematic, but also it is so smart. So it was really nice to get a chance to talk to you about that today. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank both Cindy and you, Mr. Pobi, for joining us this evening. It has been an absolute pleasure. As I've said before, we would love nothing more than for you to consider buying either City of Windows or Under Pressure from us. It just came out today. We're all big fans. And
I don't want to interrupt. I sent you 60 signed book plates too.
I was just about to say it. They're coming. I don't know if they showed up today. It was a little bit of a hectic day. I think they actually did. Either they're scheduled for today or they're coming tomorrow. I think that they might have arrived today, though. It's been hectic, though, admittedly. But we do have signed book plates if you want to order from us. And I know I'm forgetting something else. I don't have my notes in front of me because I was looking at comments. But anyway, thank you again. Thanks to the people at Minotaur Books for helping set this up. Thanks to Cindy from Conversations from a Page. If you want to follow her on Instagram, she does amazing blog entries and reviews and all sorts of great book stuff at Thoughts from a Page. And we hope you will continue joining us for these virtual events. So everyone have a good evening and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.